Good evening, everyone. The time is 5 p.m. and the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees are now convening a workshop on Monday, February 19, 2024. A quorum of board members is present. Note that Ms. McDonald is not here. She may be coming in here shortly. This meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The first item on the agenda is public comments. Becca, do we have any?
No comments.
No comments. Moving on to item 3, board workshop. Goal 2 update, academic progress board. Dr. Golden.
So Gabby Nino is going to join us at the table. She's going to, we're going to dig in, ask her questions, but she's going to give some highlights for House Bill 3, special programs, and accelerated instruction data. And so she is joined by Sarah. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good
I'm going to kick it over to Gabby to kick off.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to jump into a Goal 2 update, and I'm going to pass out some folders here, but we're going to ask you guys to hold tight on jumping into them, and I promise they are not as thick this time.
Very good, Gabby.
I promise you.
I just took my last red folder out of my bag today.
Oh, you knew it was perfect timing. We were about to jump into that again. I promise you they are not as thick this time. So our purpose this evening is really to just engage in discussion with you all again about our progress towards improving our academic outcomes. Love it, Mr. Norwood, for each and every learner. And tonight we're going to talk high level about all students, but then we're going to go deep with our special programs, get to spend some time with Sarah Wyndham and learn a bit more about their focus this year at special programs and some of the great work that they are doing as well. We're going to look at several key data sources, but they'll be super narrow. House Bill 3, I want to follow back up with you all related to some questions that you all had in our last board meeting. And then we're going to dive in deep with special programs, and part of that will also be looking at how we're accelerating instruction for students, and that'll accompany our conversation later this evening as well. But I want to start by just talking about teaching and learning in general. This image that's here, you've seen it a few times, but as we giggled about the thick folder that I brought before, we haven't really just spent time talking about what our beliefs are around instruction for students. And this is just a visual image of our instructional framework that was built really over 3 years in deep research with our principals, with teachers, working to build some language around what are the key categories of what we believe is exceptional learning in Belton ISD. And the journey of graduate is right smack dab in the middle of that instructional framework, but there's 4 different areas that we really emphasize. The first one being intentional planning. For us, intentional planning is really about the process our staff engages in at all levels of the organization, specific to teaching, the process to ensure that the experiences students have are aligned to standards, but also aligned to their needs. That's very much a part of our vision. So it's not just our standards, but the unique learning needs of the students in their classroom. And we want to really spend some time in what do students need to know, how we'll know if they've learned it or not, and then what we're going to do about it. And so that's really what the intentional planning piece of our instructional framework is. And then that goes right along with the challenging, engaging experiences for students. When we talk about challenging and engaging experiences, that's when the plans come to life side by side with students in the classroom. And we want every single student to be challenged from where they are to where they can go with their futures. What we want to see in those experiences is that there's a variety of ways for students to engage with content in the classroom that's just right for them. You asked a question recently. We've been talking a lot about assessment data. And Ms. Bash, you asked about, okay, as we're conducting all of these assessments, are we impacting the experiences for students? And that was a reality check for me to make sure that we were stopping to really paint a picture of what we want the experience to be. And that does include multiple different forms of assessment, but that question really drove us talking about this today. So thank you for that, for slowing us down a bit. The assessment for learning piece of our instructional framework is not just the state assessments that we've spent a lot of time talking about. Assessment for learning for us is putting students in situations where they have multiple different ways to demonstrate their knowledge and what they're learning in their own unique way. There is elements of it that we've talked about many times that are standardized or common that allow us to measure across educators how students are progressing and plan for that as a system. But it is not just about tests. It is not just about an assessment. It's truly about that learning process and how students are progressing. And then the final element of our instructional framework is around learning space and environment. Actually, Mike and I have worked closely together with a design team recently, really reflecting on what does it mean to say that we value learning space in Belton ISD. Learning space is all about how you design your environment aligned to the learning outcomes, how students interact in the environment. We see the classroom as an additional textbook, you could say. It can be used to really amplify the experience. And this also includes our social and emotional learning within the classrooms as well. And so wanted to bring this as a talking piece for us today to say that we've spent a lot of time working together in building out what is it that we want the experiences for students to be like in the classroom. And we've got a lot of work to do around each of these. These should drive our professional learning structures as well. But I want to commit to spending some more time and what our vision for instruction in Belton ISD looks like. So can I pause there and just ask y'all have any questions about that, or can I provide any clarity for you?
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah. As I listen to you, I'm thinking academic assessment, key progress measures, we're always looking at numbers. We're always chasing numbers. But what you're doing is much more than that. Yeah. That's pretty cool. I don't know what else to say about it, but it's pretty cool.
It's so true, though, and really, the question at our last board meeting, it really hit me hard. We do look to numbers. We do look to numbers to tell us where are gaps that exist, where we might need to focus our energy and learning. But there's a frame for what the experience should be, and that very much drives.
What does the science tell us about how that impacts numbers, the learning experience?
It actually tells us everything. So our framework is very much grounded in research. And so when you say, what does the science tell us? Like I said, we went through a process with our principals and teaching and learning team over the last 3 years to end up at this point. But this is all grounded in research, and it helped us really kind of categorize where we wanted to emphasize within our instructional framework. So those 4 questions that I mentioned earlier, what do we need students to know? How will we know if they've learned it? What are we going to do about it if they already have that content? And what are we going to do about it if they haven't learned it? Those are what we would call professional learning community questions that really define the way we should interact with each other in a collaborative culture and planning for students as well. Should result in assured mastery of experiences for students.
I just want to highlight in the center of that model is Journey of a Graduate. And so if you think about that, if we don't want it to be by chance, we want to actually grow those competencies, it takes thoughtful planning. It's not something you can just do on the fly. And so it's in the middle because you have to have thoughtful planning. Our Journey of a Graduate competency, we've talked a lot about this year around critical thinking. So you got to design for that, design for the questions that you ask in class, so it's not all closed questions, but open-ended questions. And so, we've got professional learning aligned with that. Assessment looks a little different if you're trying to measure the Journey of a Graduate competencies. Can't really always measure that with a pencil paper task. And then that learning space, I'll just add to that, had the chance to talk to elementary students recently at Burrell. about what makes learning exceptional. And what was interesting to me is how, when they are in a new space, but they were able to really articulate how learning space is impacting their learning. Without me, I didn't want to hear, I wasn't there to hear about space. I was really there to hear about learning, but they really could articulate the impact a different kind of chair has had on them, or being able to have different space to learn in. And so all of those working in tandem to try to bring that journey of a graduate to life, and students grow the knowledge and skills that we have to teach through state standards. So what this oversimplified model doesn't show you is all the detail behind it and all the links behind it. This is just our very high level picture of it, if you will, but there's a lot embedded in each of those circles.
Yeah. But what's kind of struck me in the time that I've been on the board is we didn't used to talk about this stuff, right? And so the change that I've seen is really like an increase in the level of intentionality around all these things, right? You have to have intentionality around all four in the journey of graduate in the middle. You got to measure it. You got to look at, this second grade classroom number 1 and second grade classroom number 2, like the outcome of that, like we want those to kind of be the same, right? I just see a massive increase in intentionality around all of that, and an increase in conversation around all that. I mean, I think it's absolutely going in the right direction. So,
You said that we hadn't been talking?
yeah, I don't remember talking about it like that.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
I want to pick up on a nuance of something you said, like the second grade example that you used, that the outcome might be similar or the same, but how we get there is so different.
Right, might be very different.
I'm going to use a really simple one for intentional planning and learning space and design that hit Mr. Morgan and I pretty hard. Let me just ask each of you really quick to think about who you are as a learner, and just share out what conditions need to be right when you are in your best learner space. Describe that space. If you are in your best learner mindset.
Natural lighting.
Natural lighting. Temperature.
Noise level.
Say more about the noise level for
It
you.
has to be quiet for me.
It has to be
We sit
quiet.
and think about ourselves, and it has to be quiet. I can't have the distractions.
Have to feel safe.
Visual. I'm a visual learner. So just talking at me, I need to see and touch.
For me, it looked like I had to be in the front row. And I think that's because of a lot
Yes.
because of a lot of the things that you all said, right? Like, because if I was in the front row, I didn't see all the distraction and whatever, right? So.
So it's interesting that Ms. McDonald brought up that it needs to be really quiet, and then there's all these other elements you described as well. We asked students the same question, and they brainstormed. Some students said it has to be a loud environment where they're able to move around and interact, and then there's other students that need it absolutely quiet. So if you think about intentionally planning for space, we want positive outcomes. We want students performing at academically high levels, and sometimes we put everybody in the same room oftentimes with the exact same environment, and 2 individual children, it does not meet their needs at all. And so what we are really working towards, even within learning space, is thinking about what does each learner need down to the space level, and designing for that.
And the only thing I'll add is, and sometimes they need experiences with different things to figure that out for themselves. I have a hard time sitting still. I have to be moving, but if you put me on one of the little chairs that wobbles, I promise you I will be on the floor. I can't sit still. And so I think part of it too is giving people different experiences, giving our students different experiences so they can also figure out how they learn best.
Repetition. My mind wanders a lot. I need repetition. And I need to bounce a concept off different people to tell me, explain the same concept in a different way. That's how I really grasp things.
So we want our team to know that about you and to know those unique needs for each one of you, and then intentionally plan for those experiences that will meet those needs. And that's hard, right? But having this very much simplified into to a framework that paints a mental image in people's mind is helping us move forward with our design for student experiences. So I am going to ask you to jump into your folder, and we're just going to talk about House Bill 3 real quick. And this is going to be a follow-up as well related to a conversation that we've had recently. One of the questions when we were reviewing data, we'll be on this first visual. It's got two graphs together. The first one is related to third grade House Bill 3 goals by our district. And you'll see on the same graph, on the left, blue, red, and yellow is math data, and on the right is reading data. As we were reviewing this data in a previous board meeting, the question was asked, Gabby, have we returned to pre-COVID? And I brought this in as a small look at third grade today for House Bill 3, and you can see that in math, well, there's a black bar that illustrates our 2023 established goal, and then the red bar is the pre-COVID goal. So in third grade math outcomes, you can see that we have grown since 2021, but we have not yet returned to pre-COVID in math for third grade.
Now, when you say, so that I understand this, we have a goal pre-COVID, well, the red would have been the pre-COVID.
Actual.
Is that the actual, that we were actually there, but that was on a test that we don't even take anymore?
Yes.
So, and I'm not saying it's not accurate, but we are looking, the test is harder, it is different. So we really can't compare apples to apples pre-COVID and COVID now because the test isn't even the same, is that right?
Which is part of why I wanted to bring it in this way. So we are progressing. We are absolutely progressing. The targets that are set here will take us through this year as a part of House Bill 3, and these were set just before COVID hit as well.
So this year's results will really create the new baseline, the results we get at the end of the school year.
Okay.
So really want to be able to directly answer those questions, but with a new assessment, it is challenging for us to answer that question on are we back to where we were pre-COVID. We can look at trend lines over time following cohort students, but there are some challenges with the way we reported data. In reading, you can see the red line is pre-COVID, just below 50 for this school year. And then we have our end of year target in reading for third grade as well. And very similar, assessment changed, but we have, our score has exceeded where we were pre-COVID in
I'm
literacy.
curious why the goal and the pre-COVID are flipped, reversed from math to reading.
So the targets, I want to be back at the table when they were set, but the targets were marked out over 5 years when we initially started House Bill 3. And so where the baseline was there, we set incremental targets each year to get where we are. So, but what that tells me is we just exceeded where we were beforehand, and we're projecting more growth when these were set originally.
So y'all didn't set, these were set by the prior administration due to HB3. Oh, that's right, because HB3, that would have made sense, because that's, we got the extra money, but also the extra assessments and stuff. Okay. So will y'all, when this runs its course at the end of this year, do y'all get to set the next X amount of years and say this is where we want to be instead of, I mean, how does that work from here?
So we'll set baselines based on the data, and we'll come back to set annual targets for our progress. House Bill 3 was very much, it was legislative.
Right.
Every district had to establish these, and we don't have clarity around what that's going to look like yet once these expire.
But yes, when we come back with our key progress measures, we'll also come back with new targets for our academic progress data.
So this is meets and above, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then should this match the taper data or no?
Yes, this is all based on taper data.
Okay.
Now calculations, and I saw
Yeah.
your message, there is a lot in there, and within each different area of assessment, or each different proficient reporting area, the calculations are different. So on the taper report, we'll break out categories, whereas some of our reporting is combined.
Quick question, just wondering, I mean, I've only done this in Belton ISD, and it's always been this way, but pretty much across the state, is reading always gonna be above math? Is that just the way it is? I mean, it looks like we excel really good in reading, and then we look at math, but it's always been, ever since I've been here, math has always been below reading. Is that common?
That's a hard question. Across the state, we're seeing limited growth and regression in math, dependent on the grade level. As you know, a few years ago when we entered the reading academies, there was a statewide initiative to improve reading outcomes for students. And so for Belton, yes, it does look like that. But I can't say that it's that way everywhere all the time. Where you turn your focus, you tend to see some growth. We have been focused on math for the last few years, and it continues to be a challenge for us. We are seeing growth at the individual student level, but it's not to the rate of speed that we would love for it to be. Okay, I've also captured down at the bottom our CCMR data for House Bill 3 and just visualized it the same way so that you can see where we were pre-COVID, as well as where our 2023 goal is. This is not brand new to you all, just visualized a different way in response to the questions that were asked. Now, those data points, to your points earlier, are very much based on STAR outcomes. We do have our interim assessments, which we've reviewed over the last few months in our academic updates, and I wanted to include that in here just for third grade for you all again, because that's what House Bill 3 measures. And what you see on this chart is our third grade over time interim data, both by reading and by math. And you can see, if you look at 22-23 and 23-24, really want to draw your attention there, that we do have a notable gain in the number of students who are at meets and masters. And so while it's not quite straightforward for me to be able to answer the question, are we where we were pre-COVID, we do have, again, another data point that's telling us that we are progressing and increasing the number of students who are meeting and mastering grade level standards.
Yeah, but what it does show is that now the students are gravitating
Yes.
towards one end of the spectrum or the other,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. And I will say, and that was a question that was brought up previously as well, why do we think that is? Could be contributed to our focus on critical thinking. We know that sustainable change, there's oftentimes a dip to get started. I will add a caveat of when we're collaborating with our peer districts, we are seeing the same thing in our peer districts as well. And so with the assessment structure change that we saw last year, we know that there's going to be a period of time where the performance data has to calibrate. But we are still able to pull trends for us out.
I mean, I don't know, I guess I don't understand because I'm looking at the math just from 22-23 and say we're gravitating to the extremes, but we were at, I mean, did not meet has come down substantially.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
in 22-23, we had 88 out of 100 were in the, did not meet versus, and approaches. And this year, it looks like that number's down to 58 with 42. So we are seeing increases.
Yeah,
I guess I'd say that, I don't want to say the bad side, but where you don't want to be.
yeah,
That is coming down.
yeah. I think my point was, like, ideally it wouldn't look like a dumbbell, right? Like a
Yeah.
barbell,
Yeah.
right? It would look hopefully
Yeah.
like an upward.
That's where you want,
across
that's
all
where you
that.
want it to get.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is probably a question for another day, but I wonder how much attendance plays into this. that the correlation between the kids that are here consistently in seat every day, they're on the right side of the curve, versus the kids that are missing for whatever reason, where they're falling at. I wonder what that, because I know, like, for my kids at Chisholm, I know McMurtry she's always encouraging being in your seat, like attendance matters. And so I'm curious about that.
And we can get you data on that because we have a team that looks at that very closely, and chronic absenteeism absolutely impacts you academically. And so that's why they're working so hard with campuses to really get that chronic absenteeism down, and we're seeing good gains in our overall attendance. If as we, it took a real dip after COVID, and we're starting to see it go back. Not quite to pre-COVID. In some campuses, it is back to pre-COVID, but I have a team over here that's been working really hard at really trying to change that, because we know that chronic absenteeism impacts their learning.
Gabby, I think I might have asked you this before. You can give us data campus by campus, right, too?
I can. Yes,
So-
yeah. And that's been big work. Really, Holly Moore has worked tirelessly this year, that any data that we've brought to you, then we've also been breaking it down by campus level data as well, so that we're increasing that process of making data informed decisions, while also balancing that with, here's what we want the exceptional experiences to look like for students.
Right.
And a big piece of that is understanding where the students are performing academically. But yes, we can look by campus as well.
Okay.
Any other questions that we can answer right now about this academic data? Zeroed in on third grade.
I mean, you got to comment that the master's is just a huge difference, huge improvement.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
And we ought to be cheering for that.
Oh, no.
Should.
I wasn't suggesting this is bad, right?
Okay.
I mean, there's been a lot of great progress, right?
Yeah.
But, it's like, okay, like the continued transformation, we would expect to see the red bar go down, right? The other bars continue to go up proportionally, right? That's what we should want to see, right? Yeah, that was my only point, right? Great progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've been curious about that too, and really trying to study of the students that it looks like they took a step back, what is happening with that student group, knowing that assessment questions and things have changed, but what is it? And for some students, for a lot of our students, it was one question that tilted it over. Not saying that was for all, but that was a good percentage of students. Also, testing students who don't necessarily have a history of testing, because maybe they were not necessarily taking on grade level assessment because of the special programs they were in. So in some cases, getting some new data for students that don't really have a long history of testing data. So that accounted for some of that shift as well.
It was almost like Dr. Golden teed us up. Because one of the, as we,
I did that on purpose.
you did, as
No.
we have been increasing our looks at data to inform our decisions, we've also become better at looking at individual student groups. And so really want to share the space with Sarah today to dig into some of the work that's been happening with special programs. And you'll see a little bit of what Dr. Golden was just talking about as well, with our focus on instruction and special programs. So unless there's other questions, I'll hand it over to Sarah to tell us about what's happening in special education. Good?
Okay.
Welcome,
You
Sarah.
want me to turn the page for you?
That would be great, thank you.
I didn't mean
Yes.
to for you. Sorry.
Thank you very much. All right, thank y'all for having me here. This year in special programs, we've focused on these four. These are our primary the collective focus on a continuum of services that is responsive to students, leveraging strengths and building on those strengths and addressing their needs. And we're going to show you a little bit about primary eligibility. Who are we serving? We'll talk about that. Our culture of high expectations and how we've addressed that through onboarding to prepare staff, just-in-time and appropriate and targeted professional learning, as well as our targeting our needs-aligned resources so that we can support students where they are and grow them. Working on clarity, that's another focus for us. Enhanced communication, both with staff and families, and engaging our parents as partners, growing our presence in the community, and opportunities for students, which speaks to the future ready piece, growing the whole child, journey of graduate competencies, and increasing the number of opportunities they have within the day and outside of the day, the school day. Okay? I get to do this. All right. Just a little celebration in this one. I want to point out the growth in opportunity and participation. The fall 2019, that is our very first camp champion, and we couldn't even fit them in that same frame this past fall. So we are excited about the growth and participation in all of our extracurricular activities. Our focus has been all about a responsive continuum. We recognize that every student has individual needs, and it is important for us to meet them where they are and grow them. That comes through high expectations, clarity, and future-ready focus. Thank you. So for high expectations require a high level of support. For our educators, we've targeted professional learning. We have made ready, just like every teacher in this district, we built data systems where they can look at what the students are doing. This particular example is, how did they do on STAR last year? And then we can overlay high priority standards so we know where our students where the learning needs to be focused to improve their performance on assessments. That drives our data-informed practices. Teachers need to know where they need to focus. And also obviously needs-aligned targeted resources. We've focused heavily this year on providing teachers with resources that are aligned to the gen ed resources, general ed curriculum. Even for our students in an alternate curriculum setting, they have resources that are aligned to the curriculum as well. So that gives everyone a clear message that we expect our children to be taught well and to grow. So
I'm going to jump in here with Sarah real quick on the culture of high expectations, and we're going to stay here for just a bit. And we'll ask you to go into your special education folder, tab in the folder. Want to start with you all understanding who we serve within our special programs department. When Sarah said continuum of services, really we feel like it's important that you understand the continuum of needs that exist as well. And so if you'll, the very first page in your folder has a color bar graph and not a pie graph at the bottom. And Sarah will walk you through just who it is that we serve, and you'll understand that wide range of needs.
So just taking a look, you notice our numbers in the top graph have obviously increased in the area of special education, but in 504, it's a little flat, right, that growth, and we believe that is reflective of the changes in law about dyslexia and then moving students out of being served through 504 and dyslexia into the special ed umbrella of services. On the pie graph at the bottom, that just shows, that also reflects that, because you notice the largest wedge is specific learning disability as a primary eligibility. And that would be where our students with dyslexia, they are in that category as well. So we're seeing that growth in that area. The other, over time, and you'll see on the following page, well, not the following, but farther back in, we'll talk about it, but the other areas of eligibility have kind of stayed pretty much the same. So we're seeing that big growth in that area.
What is the reason for moving dyslexia students into the special ed umbrella? Do you know the philosophy behind it?
It's a change in the law and practice, because, I mean, the rest of the country believes that it is a specific learning disability. So we are falling in line. I don't know if you remember the Houston Chronicle article and how we were not evaluating students. There's just a lot of change, and with that law and advocacy by parents of students with dyslexia, the law has changed, and and it's being recognized. Texas is coming around to what other states are doing as well.
I can see that that becomes an issue in regard to staffing, right? Because then you have to have more special ed teachers to fulfill a need that you didn't necessarily have
Right.
in the past.
I will say that the need has existed there. So, as a campus leader, when I had students who were served, who met eligibility for dyslexia and were served through Section 504, my intervention team might be serving them. I might have a staff member who has a certification to teach dyslexia on my team. And then some students were receiving services through special education. And with our goal being to reduce variability, it does help us align the services that students are receiving, invest in learning to grow our teachers, and it eliminates some of the confusion that our families and staff face. So it doesn't necessarily always mean an additional staff. It's pulling the services into the same umbrella of services.
That's true.
Are we seeing more, and this is just a question, I think it actually goes to the autism too, because I know over the years, those two numbers have risen. Have they really risen, or are we able to identify kids with dyslexia easier now, and there's more kids that are being identified on the spectrum for autism as well? Is it the same thing that it's always been there? But, because I know grown adults who are like, I was never diagnosed, but I've been dyslexic my whole life. Are we just better at identifying it now?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that's also true. Just the community is more sensitive to those needs, and there's increased awareness, which means we're asking the right questions and knowing when we need to assess. So,
You may explain child find.
so
I think that's related to.
correct. So it's our duty to find all of the children in our community who need special education services and evaluate them. So we advertise, we communicate with our community partners, daycares, private schools, and so the awareness is there. The state advertises as well, and
Okay.
we do push that material out as well with TEA. So yeah, we're definitely seeking out those students and offering
Is that
support.
an internal advertisement to like the parents, or does that go out to the community? How does that work?
Well, in every office, every front area of the school, we're advertising Child Find. We communicate with the daycares. We have strong relationships with a lot of the daycares in the area. And Bex is a great source because families come to us for that outstanding experience. And then as they attend, they might need a little extra help and evaluation. So also the medical community is a great source of referral, because they are more in tune to, it's not just, oh, wait and grow it out. They're becoming more aware that they need to refer students for evaluation.
It is not just Belton ISD though. I know
That's true.
we are required by law to engage in child find practices.
All right.
Related to your sense of growth, if you'll turn to the next visualization, you'll see the actual trend lines for, and you can see the changes that you were referencing, Mr. Muller.
Right. So in the top, the percentage, you'd see the yellow, that's 504. It's kind of flatlined a little bit, but if you'll notice the blue for special ed and then the red for dyslexia, they mirror each other in their upward incline. So there we go. Do you want to add to that?
Your question around 504 and special education, so you can see the shift here where we started to move students from Section 504 services into special education. So that explains the trend line and the change in direction.
So when they make that move, do they no longer have a Section 504 in place? Do they still carry it forward?
Once you're identified as a student with special education services, then you are no longer under the protections of 504.
Oh.
So, I mean, you have the same protections, but you have more
Right.
rights as a student.
Okay.
Yes.
Planned on Cadillac. It's what it is. That's how we used to.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because both of my sons have their 504 for dysgraphia, which if they had that when I was a kid, they wouldn't have hit me with the ruler all the time because I couldn't write. But I was told that would follow them all the way through college to where they can, but in college everybody types everything anyway, so it doesn't come out.
Correct. So that's true. 504 does follow you all the way through into adulthood, really. Special ed does not, but you can still, our students, when they graduate, if they're going to go to a post-secondary institution, they can still bring their IEP and access accommodations
Okay.
that way.
When I went to college and when I started teaching, special ed population in public school has always hovered around 10 to 12% for years and years and years. And here we are at almost 20. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, is that correct? Do you believe that's correct? Sorry.
I would worry about
No,
it.
don't be sorry.
I just want to think, I want to give you a thoughtful answer.
Do not be sorry.
And it's the same about gifted. Gifted and talented is always 10 to 12%
Sure.
population.
Sure.
It's bell curve.
So there are two things to think about it. Nationally, because the rest of the nation already included dyslexia under special education, their percentages were already a little higher anyway. So, like I said, we're kind of coming around to what the rest of the country is doing. But also, I mean, we still have to move kids through the continuum. So part of our work is to make sure it's responsive, and when children are ready to go and not be a student with an IEP anymore, then that's a celebration as well.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
and I guess maybe that's what I would like to say, is I do hope we are trying to move kids through, if possible, if possible.
It is a high priority area of focus for us.
I'll say in a bit, I just mixed Sarah and Sherry. Sherry, our director of special education. Sarah's going to walk through some math data with you all that I think will show that we are growing some students. One of the additional focus areas for their team this year has been around what we call MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support. We would share your concern around the percentage of students who are meeting eligibility. We'll say that post-COVID, some of the rules and regulations around identification of students do lend themselves to more students meeting eligibility for special education as well. So there's lots of contributing factors, but it means we have to have really strong systems in place with our teachers related to intentional planning aligned to students' needs. That we're coming to the table and saying, what is this child's unique learning needs, and are we designing experiences related to that and monitoring progress towards them. Sarah and her team have worked on aligning resources this year to specific learning needs versus just a blanket of resources, and we're seeing early indicators of that really having a positive impact. So I'd just say that these multi-layers of support are critically important for us. We would agree with you that that percentage is not ideal, and we're strengthening our systems to make sure that if a student is referred for special education and tested, that we are totally okay with that. We want every child to get what they need, but we also want it to be a very solid assessment of their learning needs. So,
What about our staffing? Does our number of staffing measure up to the number of kids that are needing? Because I mean, again, it's a spectrum of services from speech to even kids with ADHD can be served under special education.
That's
but,
correct.
Just can you talk a little bit about staffing? I
Well,
know that's
and
a
I
really
can
loaded
share-
question.
I mean, I'll butt in just a little bit, but, and we'll talk more when we look at budget, but that has been driving some of our staffing increases, is the need to add teachers who serve our students that receive special education services. So we are seeing that number driving our staffing increases as well. Is that fair to say, Todd? Yeah.
Yes.
Feel free to add to that, but I just wanted to say we are paying attention to that, and that is driving staffing needs up.
That's pretty much, yes. It
And
is-
Sarah,
it
when
is an impact.
we look at this, so we saw a 238 student increase from one year to the next in terms of students receiving special education services. Am I reading this right, that the two areas really driving that are students qualifying under other health impaired and specific learning disability?
Yes.
And you think the specific learning disability, the change in dyslexia is what's driving that one up, potentially?
That tends to be the trend.
Okay.
Yes. According to those trend lines, it's reflective of that.
Okay.
And Mr. Alcazar, you said earlier, like seeing it in multiple different ways really reinforces concepts for us. If you go to the next visualization in there, it says growth per disability in special programs, and you'll see a big spike on specific learning disabilities, both in the top visualization and the bottom, and that is, we believe that's the change in dyslexia, because that now is considered a specific learning disability, and so that spike reflects that growth.
When we talk about the dyslexia, and you mentioned the Houston Chronicle article, now I'm trying to remember.
That was about evaluations. Yeah.
Didn't Texas get sued by the federal government because of dyslexia and that's right, we got sued.
That was about an artificial cap on
Yeah, because we capped the number and
evaluations.
said you can't, the state of Texas said you
Yeah.
can't have any more than this
Of
many kids
special
in
population.
special education.
Yes.
And they sued us because
They did.
special education falls under the purview of the federal government,
Yes.
not state government.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And now we have a budget
Yeah, I
shortfall.
just remember the law.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I remember the cap, I was like,
Contributing
wait a minute, you
factor
can't
for
just
sure.
say, hey, it can't be over 4%. Okay.
Right.
So let's talk about some academic data with the resource alignment. If you'll turn beyond eligibility, Sarah is going to talk a little bit about the alignment of resources they've done this year.
Yes, so we are super excited about our resources that are aligned not only to what our general ed counterparts are using, but they are definitely aligned to what our students need. And we are excited about this Math 180 piece. That's why we're showcasing this one. If you notice, it starts at the top, greater than 2 grades below, 2 grades below, 1 grade below. Looking at the beginning of year data, the blue line, obviously multiple students, a large number of students were greater than 2 grades below. Mid-year data, look at the shrink. That red should be shrinking, right? Our students are making gains, they're closing gaps. Fewer students are 2 grades below. We're evening out at the 2 grades, and then we're actually seeing some progress. So our students are closing the gaps. This tells us that in a short amount of time, this resource is making a big impact for our 6th through 12th graders. And we are excited about that. Our teachers love it. They are very invested in this resource.
So what?
It's Math 180.
What population of student?
Oh, these would be our resource math
Okay,
students and from grades 6 to 12.
Okay.
Yes. But we have other targeted resources about reading comprehension, reading comprehension strategies, and other, other resources to address reading as well, and elementary and secondary. So this is just something we thought we're excited about this. The teachers, I love it when teachers are excited about something.
They love it because it's easy to implement. They love it because it's working for both.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah. What this will do, they do an initial assessment, and it helps them differentiate it down to student need, and then offer some guidance on building back up and building those skills. So it's connected to the curriculum. It's exposure to the grade level curriculum, but at a differentiated level.
So before this year, were they just doing the Star Renaissance for the resource students for math?
That's what we would say, but we are working very hard to improve our agreed upon processes.
Yes.
So, if I were to jump in on this, I didn't ask, I just went to it. What was happening with our special programs teachers is a student might meet eligibility for, let's say, a math calculation disability. There was not a go-to resource for our teachers to reference in planning for that student. And Read 180 is a structure that, yes, there is ease of access and use in this. The training is not super cumbersome to learn, and the way the program is structured is there's direct instruction, there's small group instruction that engages the teacher, as well as some digital resources, and it's all standards aligned, which is very exciting for us because our students aren't receiving any instruction that is not intentionally planned based on their needs and connected to our standards. And we're seeing a very exciting early indicator of a reduction in number of students that are below level, or more than 2 grade levels below, who are meeting eligibility for special programs. It's resulted in, as Dr. Golden referenced earlier, us asking ourselves if we were making appropriate testing decisions for students before. And so in that interim data, some of the contribution to a rise in students who may not have been meeting standards is that we are giving students who haven't had the opportunity to assess at their grade level that opportunity now. And so if you haven't had that opportunity year after year, likely your initial run at it is not going to be the most positive results we want to see. So,
Do you happen to know right offhand what the student population count is for this? Like,
Not off the top of
Okay.
my head, but I can get that.
yeah, is that something we can get? Okay.
So really, another way to look at this, because this graph does tell a lot, those first 2 at the top, the 2 grade, greater than 2 and 2 grades, that would basically be, going back to other verbiage, the does not meet, which is coming down, which is what we want. 1 grade below would be like approaches, and then meets and masters are the 2 at the bottom.
Correct.
Where y'all are growing.
That's fair.
Because it is a different, you got to look at it different, because the one number's getting smaller, it's getting bigger, but that's what it's supposed to be.
Yes. The movement is in the right direction. Yes.
so that's just one example of an academic resource that has been plugged into our special programs classrooms this year. We also have Tiffany Pullen is really an instructional coach and coordinator for all of our resource classrooms, and that's a first time for us as well, where there's direct support for our resource and inclusion teachers. And this visual that Sarah referenced up here is getting to the standard level with each and every one of our students, and we're just excited to see that happen.
Yes.
We're gonna watch time and move us along a little bit. Even with thinning it out, Mr. Floor, there is still some data in there. There's one graph in here that I'd like to draw your attention to without unpacking it. We've broken down our student groups as said by all students, by special education students, students who are economically disadvantaged, and our emerging bilingual students. It's on this graph. And what this shows is the number of the percentage of students by grade level and their growth projections. The reason this is in here is for almost every grade level and subject area, the rate of growth for our students who meet eligibility for special education is higher than the growth rate for students who do not. So I just want to call your attention to that without going to each one, that we are seeing higher growth with our students who meet eligibility for special education. And we're excited about that for the same concerns that you brought up earlier. All right, Sarah? Emerging bilingual. Yes. You want to finish us with clarity, Sarah?
Okay. So as we said, we are increasing our communication with families, meeting them where they're at, so they are aware of our opportunities, Parents as Partners nights, Camp Champions, Special Olympics, any of those opportunities. And we're seeing, as you can tell in that lower left, the increase in participation. We've nearly doubled our Penguin Project mentors. So Camp Champions through the roof. It's so exciting. And Parents as Partner Night participation. We just showcased CTE and the participation was amazing. The feedback, we saw faces we had not seen before. We usually kind of get the usual crowd and we saw new faces, which is great. We're very excited about that. In terms of staff communication and agreed upon processes, our staff at the 30-day mark gave us this feedback. They said they felt prepared to do their job and they had the right resources. So that's good news. I'm excited about that. I need to go. Okay. So future ready, I'm super proud of this slide because, and I'll speak quickly, I'm so sorry. 2 years ago we were awarded the Autism Grant, Innovative Services for Students with Autism. We've received over $1.5 million over the course of 2 years. Every campus has a sensory motor room. We've had impact in terms of sensory activities and access to sensory items that help students prolong their ability to stay in class and stay on target. And another big impact was with transportation. Our special ed bus drivers and any bus driver can have a sensory box on the bus, and that is outstanding, meeting the needs of students where they are. Another one, Penguin Project, y'all know how amazing this is. What else is there to say? We had too many mentors, and we're seeing new faces this year. We're super excited about that. And don't forget your tickets, because late April, mark your calendars. Work-based learning, our team today at Recharge was presenting to all employees in the district about how they run their program and what they've learned, and it is outstanding. They are traveling to Houston later this month, and again in San Antonio and over spring break to talk about the work that they're doing and what they've learned. We're very proud of them.
I had the greatest experience today at Recharge with one of our students who's featured there, works with Buckles and Means, and I said, hey, how's your day going? Is it pretty busy? He said, not too much for us. We've got it around here. I said, were you sold out yet? And he said, even if we do, we exist to serve you. So, I just love it. Our journey of a graduate competencies are so, such a common thread through each of these things that Sarah is highlighting.
So Delta, obviously we are excited about that new facility, but even as is today, we are doubling our partnerships with community members. We're going to have a reverse job fair here at the building. Our team is creating new opportunities for our students every day. We're super proud of that. And obviously Special Olympics, they are quite the team, and they're a competitive bunch, y'all. They have a good time, and the spirit of collaboration and teamwork it's heartwarming. It's great to see them in action. It's quite something. So we are proud that we are growing in all of these opportunities. We're growing our journey of graduate competencies with students.
All right. Do y'all have questions?
A lot of good news.
Yeah. Seeing growth, we still have areas to improve,
Absolutely.
but being able to see
100%.
some early indicators, so that's a testimony to the work that Sarah and team are doing and our teachers in their classrooms.
Thank y'all.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that concludes our board workshop this evening. There being no further business, this meeting adjourned is, let's see, 5:58 p.m.